Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's guest is Gerard White. Gerard was born in Tallahassee, Florida, with a sister and two older brothers. Life changed when he was 5 years old and his parents divorced. His life went down a dark path as a teenager as he got involved selling weed, cocaine, and ecstasy for the money and the power it brought. The adrenaline of life was its own drug, and Gerard wondered when and where it would end. At 19 years old, he was caught in a drug sting that found him facing 35 years for armed drug trafficking. Gerard had no faith life when he went to prison. He entered a faith-based camp in Tallahassee while in prison and eventually earned an early work release after 5 years behind bars. The challenges kept coming, however, as Gerard was diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia during his work release, and upon release, he had 30 days to find a job or face returning to prison. One random act of kindness led to a breakthrough as Gerard began to lean into his new faith and his life began to turn around. I'm excited to have Gerard on the show today to share his determination to grind through adversity and discover faith has taken him places he never could have imagined. And with that, Gerard White, welcome to the show.
Wow, thanks, Eric. That's a heck of an intro, brother. I'm humbled by that. Never had somebody read it back to me before. So I appreciate you the opportunity of doing that and having me on your show to share my story, share my testimony.
It's an honor to have you here, man. And I know you are an open book, and we're going to go into some places that I think our listeners are going to be inspired to hear and probably a little taken aback, like, oh my gosh, how does this guy come off the bottom here? But your story is so powerful, brother. And so I'm excited to have you here and to dig into it.
I appreciate you. I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to doing it as well and to share with somebody so they could hear it and be inspired for themselves, and to turn to God and dig deeper. That's what we're all called to do.
Right on. Love it. All right, brother, let's talk about childhood and growing up. I know you talked when we talked before that age 5 was this kind of line that life changed a lot. But what was it like kind of, did you remember even before that? I mean, 5 is pretty young, but what was it like for you growing up before 5 and then after?
Yeah, I mean, I had a normal childhood, I would say. I mean, my father worked a lot, so he wasn't home a lot of times. Not a lot of memories before that, it was mainly the breakup where everything shifted. Before I would say it was just a normal life growing up with my two brothers, my sister, and it was fine. But when that divorce happened, and it was instant, it was my mother literally had went out of town to visit a friend, and she sent her friend's daughter to come get me and my sister out of the house. So they came, picked up me and my sister, took us away, and I didn't see my father or my two brothers again. Saw them one time in a visitation after that, but it was almost 13 years after that before I actually saw my father and my brothers again.
So when they split, you didn't see it coming at all. You're just a kid. You're like, no idea.
Yeah, completely clueless. I was 5 years old. It was nothing like that. They did a good job of, like I said, my father did. My mom went to visit a friend out of town for the day and literally came back and everything got taken out.
Wow, man. That had to be just devastating, right? And you don't see your dad again. It's almost like he died. 13 years. And your brothers.
Yeah. That played a huge impact on me, not having a father figure around and not being able to have that closure with my brothers or my father. That really, looking back, impacted me more than I knew at that time. As a young boy, you're just dealing with what's going on, and my mom quickly got a new boyfriend, and then I had a stepdad, and he was a good guy, but he was a stepdad. And he didn't really know how to step into that father role, and there was just some things there with mental illness and things of that nature that really just caused me in this spiral, where I was lost for a long time, so lost. I remember being at like 11, 12 years old, looking at myself in the mirror and wondering if I killed myself, would anybody miss me?
Man. And that's tough, man, for an 11-year-old to even think that way, right? To think about you. So you're having suicidal thought there. And did that build up over time? Do you remember feeling like, was the home life just terrible? What was going on that would kind of lead you to that?
There was no real love shown in the house. There was a lack of love. My mother got remarried, like I said, to my stepdad. They had 2 new kids and they were kind of doing their own thing. And we were it's like an afterthought, just kind of there. And there, like I said, there wasn't a connection with my stepdad. I mean, he worked, and looking back, he probably maybe tried, but nothing to where there was nothing solid that I could hang on. And it was just not that missing my father, my brothers, and the lack of love. I just didn't feel loved.
And so now you're in a house of, you have your sister, and then you have the two new step sisters.
So no, they ended up having 3 kids. So it was 2 step brothers, two half brothers, yeah. 2 half brothers, and 1 half sister. So there's 5 of us in this household. And it was just my stepfather working, he just working retail jobs. We were living, in middle, first it was middle class, and then it quickly went downhill as each child was kind of born, and quickly we were living in, very lower income on food stamps and disabilities. I remember, at that time, lights would get cut off for a week in the house because there wasn't enough money. If there was arguments I would hear over, oh, well, you can't work over certain hours because they cut off the assistant. So then seeing this, I was like, what is going on? I mean, why did God put me here? I remember questioning that.
Really?
Even though there wasn't faith in the house, my mother was born Jewish. My stepfather was an atheist. There was no real faith or prayer or Bible. It wasn't one in my house. And I remember saying, God, why is this like this? Because I would go to my friend's house and it wasn't that way. And I would see that. So I would try to go over to friends' house as much as possible and be around those normal environments. And that really showed me how much I was lacking in my home. It really showed it to me.
Did you have any positive male role models? So your brothers must have been much younger than your half brothers were much younger than you, right? Because if your parents divorced, you're 5, your mom gets together with her new husband, they have kids. So these kids are what, 6, 7 years younger than you?
Yeah, I was 9 years old by the time they started having kids, 8, 9 years old. So there was a huge gap. As I got older, there was, God, it's amazing. God always places certain people in your life to help strengthen you in different ways. I remember in 4th grade, that first male role model was placed in my life. He lived 2 houses down. His name was Tom Thomas. And I met him because I went to rake his yard. We lived in Tallahassee. They had big oak trees, and I had to earn money because my parents didn't have enough to get me the certain clothes or things that I wanted in school. So I was always like, hey, let me rake the yard. And then he did bikes. He rode bikes and he did jogs, marathons, and 5Ks and things like that. So my mother would let me go with him. So I did that, and he was a good male role model for a little while for me. Then we moved around a lot as a child. That was a problem too. I think I went to 6 different elementary schools.
Oh, whoa.
So it was a lot of transitioning, a lot. But then as I got a little bit older at 13, 14, he placed another gentleman in my life who taught me how to really be a man of value, as far as having to take care of certain things, how to hunt, how to fish, how to work on cars, all that. But he didn't have a faith. He actually was an alcoholic, so I experienced that and saw his drinking problems. But God always placed those certain men to help condition me in certain ways.
So did you have like a sport life when you were kind of in that 11, 12 years old? What did you do sort of to kind of entertain yourself? Were you into anything like that, or was it not enough time, money, resources?
Yeah, not a lot of time, money, and resources. I would play basketball with just friends in the neighborhood, but I wasn't in like a sport. I had hurt my wrist when I was younger, when I was trying out for the basketball team. I made the basketball team, and I had tore the ligaments in my thumb in a practice one time. So that kind of ended that. And it was just, I remember I tried to sign up for, you just brought a memory back, to Little League Baseball. And I wanted to join that. I had got a glove. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this with my friends. And they would never take me. They would never take me to a game. They would never take me to the practice. I remember, no, they had one car and it was always something was going on. And I remember riding my bike. I used to ride my bike all over the time. That was like my freedom. I mean, I'd ride a bike 5, 6, 7, 8 miles at 8, 9 years old, no problem.
Yeah.
And I would just ride myself to the practice, but nobody would come to the game. And then after that, nobody would pay. There wasn't the money to pay for the next season. And I was like, what am I doing this for? And that was kind of the end of that.
All right. So At what point, so if you're in the kind of 11, 12, 13, at what point do you start to get either exposed to drugs, or does something happen family, or not, maybe not family, but friend wise, where you're now kind of exposed to some kids where that comes up? Or when did that begin? What did that attraction, what sort of led you there?
Yeah, so we moved from Tallahassee to a smaller town called Crawfordville in Wakulla County, down by the Gulf of the Panhandle, and we moved to a predominantly Black trailer park kind of area. I was in the 8th grade. Everything that I had knew from Tallahassee, all those friends that I had, everybody that I would go and find those escapes, I was now put in this new environment. And yeah, started experimenting around friends that are new associates. They weren't friends, new associates that, were smoking weed at that time. The girl across the street, that's what led me to the drug life. Is she was older. She was much older. She was like 20, and she smoked, but also sold weed, and it was right across the street from my house. So I started hanging out with them, and just slowly that escalates very quickly. And when you're lost and you're looking for anything, you attach to things. And so there was a lot of that going on there. That's really when the beginning point started for me. It was right around the 8th grade.
Man, 8th grade. Yeah, that's, I think as well, certainly as humans, but I think as kids, especially as you're coming up, and it's probably adults too, you're looking to attach yourself to something, right? You're looking for a group, you're looking for people to feel belonging. And, when you're moving around like you're moving around, you must not have had any sort of belonging or group, right? If you move 6 times elementary school, that's basically once a year coming through elementary school.
Sometimes twice a year. I went to like 2 first grades. Oh,
wow.
But yeah, it was almost every year. Very difficult, like you said, to find a belonging or a group, a core group to be a part of. Looking where I am now, I know that was God preparing me to be so good at transitions, because I was going to have a lot of transitions over my life. So that at the time was, why is this happening? But it leads to how he prepares me for the next chapter of my life. But it was definitely very tough. And you're always looking, like you said, to belong, to be a part of something, especially when you're not feeling that from home. So I'm seeking outwardly for those things. And it was at that time also that we moved down there that my mother decided she's going to homeschool us. So now I'm not even attending high school. I never attended high school. And homeschool at my house with my mom was, we're not going to school anymore, and then I'm going to go take my GED when I turn 16. That was homeschool.
Oh, wow.
So I wasn't, because I think computers were kind of really just coming out, and the internet at that time, we're living in the woods, dial up, and it's not like there's a lot of stuff there. So that was another part of me just having all this time, empty time, and idle time is a devil's workplace.
Right.
And he went to work on me, and I was lost.
Yeah, man. What you said a minute ago is so powerful to me. It's so impactful, which is that idea that when you're going through some struggle, looking back on it, you said now you can see that you were being prepared. God was preparing you for something that you would need later, right? A lot of transitions. So you were learning at a young age how to deal with transitions. He was forming you in that way. And I think that's a powerful way to look at things in terms of when you're going through a struggle in life, as opposed to this, man, why does this keep happening to me? Why does this keep happening to me? Why is this happening now? This idea that, what am I being taught right now, right? What is God teaching me in this struggle? What am I being prepared for? What tools am I supposed to pick up in this particular season that I will need later, as opposed to looking at it like a negative, right? It's a challenging thing to do, bro. I certainly experience it myself, where you feel like, man, why does this happen? Or why does that keep happening? And as opposed to looking at it like, I'm being taught something here. What is the lesson that either that I'm refusing to learn, or that I'm really, that the heat of that fire is being, it's there, it's intense there because I need it to be formed for what's coming,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I love that perspective you shared.
Well, I really picked up on that And that really spoke to me, like I said, because I questioned why for so much of my adolescence. Like, why God? Why is this? Why that? And as God uses amazing people at different times to speak those powers and niblets into you to see how you're going to handle that. I truly believe that. When I was going into prison, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I had a guy tell me, he said, you're going to have two choices. You can look around, you can allow this to make you bitter or better, but that's up to you. And you'll look around and see which people made what decision. And so what you just said, that was the advice that he kind of gave me that really shifted my mindset on a lot of stuff.
Right on. Man, that's so true too, right? I mean, we can choose the things happen and we choose how we respond to them, right? And that idea that you can choose to see it as being a victim and being bitter, or being a victor and saying, I just take these things and I roll on, right?
Yeah.
And get and learn from it. So let's talk about, so as you've now been exposed to some drugs, at what point do you start to see this as, hey, there's a business here, I can make money doing this, right? At what point do you start selling drugs?
It was when I moved out of the house. So by 15, I was couch surfing with some of these associates that I was already hanging out with. I always hung out with a little bit older crowd than me. It's just how it was. Like I said, when I was in 8th grade, I was hanging out with this girl who was 20. At the time I'm 15, I'm hanging out with people that are in college, that have their own places. And so it was at that point, my mother was always like, you can't move out of the house until you're 16. But I wasn't there half the times anyway, but I was just gone, Yeah. So at 16, I officially moved out. Took a test I took a training class for 1 week, got my GED. That was the deal for me to move out. Had to have my GED. Okay, so I moved out, passed it, no problem, moved out. And like I said, I'm around everybody. I always had a job, but at $5.15 an hour, you can't support yourself, living on your own. You got to pay rent. You have to have a car now, gas, insurance, everything was on me. When I moved out, it was like, this is you. So my friends, like I said, everybody was smoking weed, and that girl who I knew, she was the supplier. And I'm like, well, why don't I just buy a little more and sell to them? And so that's what really got me into it. It's just the dabbling in buying an ounce of marijuana. And then that escalates because more people find out, and I'm the easiest person to contact. And then as you get older and you meet different people, you get associated with different drugs, and those resources just come available. And then that's when the money really starts to come in. And then you're like, wow, everybody wants me, right? I'm needed. That was something that I was lacking in my childhood, that people needed me. So looking back, I didn't realize at the time, but that's what I was attached to: the money, the power, but also that need. People were wanting me. So I escalated that to have every drug that they could possibly want. I had. And then the money and all the new cars and all that stuff that comes with it gets to your head, and you're just living for the world. I remember being so lost. I used to have a gun on me all the time, and I used to always say, there's so many rounds in it for everybody else, and then there's one left for me if it comes down to it. That was the mentality, the street mentality that I had, because there were multiple things that happen in that lifestyle where you get robbed because it's a vicious, you're living that life. I've adapted myself to, this is who I am. I'm a drug dealer. This is what I'm going to do, but I justified it in my mind that I'm giving these people the best drugs that they could get. I'm not stepping on it, making sure it's clean. So I'm helping them, but I'm trying to justify it here. That's what I did in my mind at the time. And at the same time, I am just lost and living for the world. At the time, I thought I was this highest person because all these things. I was the lowest I'd ever been in my life, and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah, man. Did your mom and did your family, you have any connection to your family at this point?
None.
None. So None. She's not, okay, she's not part of your life at all. She's not asking any questions. You're not even around her for her to go like, hey, what's going on? How did you afford that? What are you doing? She never.
I would go in and out sometimes or pop in, she never really called. It was none of that. I always had a cell phone. My cell phone number has stayed the same. I've been really good at that. No real connection there. I would pop in and out, and they would see I'd have a new car or a new this, and I dress nice. It was no questions were asked type of thing.
Interesting. Were you using at the time too? So are you?
You're
using
definitely. As well? Yeah. When you're involved in that life, you're definitely partying too. Yeah. I was always able to, and all of the brother I hung out with, they were never this way, but I could just cut it off. I would party and do this, but I could just cut it off.
Yeah.
no problem. But I was definitely lost. So I was using it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you're getting into your upper teens. I know we talked in the intro, you get arrested at 19. Are there any close calls before you get arrested in terms of either drinking and driving, getting shook down by somebody in a drug transaction, anything like that? Anything where you feel like this, like, oh man, I dodged one right there?
Oh yeah, twice. When I was 18, like I said, I lived in a smaller town, and they know when you live in a small town, small cops know, they know what's going on. They do. Literally 1 week after I turned 18, I had somebody do a controlled buy from me in the town. They waited till after I was 18. They knew I was going to they could arrest me. So I got arrested actually for selling marijuana at that time. And I did 90 days in the county jail, and I was put on probation. And to me, it was like, when I was thrown in that, oh, this is what people do. You go into jail, you meet a lot of the people, and this is what they're doing. Still, nothing really shook me. It was just a part of the lifestyle, So I had that probation, and I was always on probation this whole rest of the time. And there was one time where I got pulled over on drinking under the influence at 18 years old, but I happened to know the cop. I knew who he was, and I was able to. The state trooper actually showed up, and he talked the state trooper away from leaving, and I was.
You're able to
by
get
the
away.
grace of God, I was able to get away.
Wow, man. Do you ever have a cop tell you or anybody say, dude, you're going on a path that's going to lead you nowhere? Anybody try to talk you back?
No, not like that.
Nothing like that.
No. I had one really close call that really I knew, and it was very close to the time I got this thing when it happened, when I got finally arrested. It was, as a matter of fact, like 3 weeks before that I was somewhere in a parking lot doing a rather large transaction with somebody, and a guy comes out in front, and he's peeing in the parking lot right in front of me in this billiard place. And I said I should flash my lights and mess with the guy. And the guy I'm doing the transaction with, he's like, no, don't do it, don't get nervous, because these are affluent people. By this time, there's not just there's a lot of affluent people that use drugs. Let me say that. A lot of it was led to that level. It wasn't low level type of stuff. So he was like, no, don't do that, I'm nervous. And I said, okay. I didn't do anything. The guy gets in his truck and backs into my car, my brand new car.
On purpose?
No.
Oh.
He's drunk.
Oh, okay.
He's drunk.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh man, let's see what this is. The guy gets out. Now somebody called the police. Now I've taken everything I have, drugs, everything, and I put it in the trunk of my car, right? Because I kind of know some laws and things like that. And so I feel that's the safest place for now for me to deal with this. Long story short, the cop that came, the guy that backed into my car, he was a police officer. He was off work.
Oh.
He let him go, right? He let him leave. And the cop starts questioning because he thinks there's something suspicious. Why am I in my car? What's going on here? He finally searches me, doesn't find anything, but then he goes to the back of the car, wants to open the trunk before he lets me go. I'm in my car. I said, I got to go inside and pop the trunk. I go in to pop the trunk and I take off. So I leave him standing there.
You get in the car and drive away.
I drive away. Yeah, for sure. Because if he opens that trunk, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. And I was able to lose him, and that was when I knew, like, wow, like I'm really cutting the edge here. It's crazy to even think back.
Did he chase you? Was it a pursuit? Or?
Yeah. I was able to get away because I had a little bit of a jump on him because he was standing behind my car, and the way his car was parked and where the exit was, I was backed in. So I was able to get a pretty good jump on him, and I'm from that area. So I know a lot of the back roads, and I was able to maneuver around, but I had a little small dent on the front of my car.
Yeah.
And the night that sting went down where I got arrested, I hadn't fixed that dent yet. I had a part in the body shop, and I had a newer car. It was brand new. Like no one else in that town had that new car at the time. And I was backed into my spots. And I believe the cop walked by. The reason why he went and searched my car after finding me was because of that dent. Like he had probably heard or something about that. So it ended up coming back full circle on me.
Wow, man. So that had to be, when you flee like that, when you take off, I'm trying to picture, do the cops now are like, okay, this guy clearly had something that he didn't want us to see, whatever. He fled. So now we have a warrant for him. We're going to, whenever we see him next, we're hooking him up. Whether we catch him in a drug deal or not, we're bringing him in. Is that what's going on?
They violated my probation and I didn't know about it.
Okay.
So that's what led to whenever jump forward 3 weeks, I was wrong. I was at this hotel doing some business, dropping some things off. Like there's a knock on the hotel door. Right at the time I'm opening the door to come out, there's a knock. So I walk out the door and I get slammed. 2 cops are there. They slam me. They said, "Hey, you're under arrest." I said, "What am I under arrest for?" They said, "Violation of probation." I'm like, "Okay, all right, no big deal." And they take me, put me in the back of the cop car. The only thing I have on me are my car keys and my wallet. I knew that I had saw police activity in the neighborhood, in the area. So I knew not to bring anything out of the room with me. And they put me in the car. As they put me in the car, I see them take my lights on my car flash. And I said, "Get away from my car. You can't go in my car." They went in my car and then found a extensive amount of cocaine and ecstasy and things like that. And that's really the night that I went to jail, and I had a case hanging on illegal search and seizure, on the amendment there. But that's where I found faith in God, in jail while I'm there through all the turmoil, and they put your name on a paper now with 35 years next to it. It really hits you like a ton of bricks that what am I doing in this life?
So from that arrest, you go through a trial. So you're in lockup at that point, or are you on bail that you get bailed out? Or
I can't bail out because there was a violation of probation. So it was a new charge on a violation of probation. So I couldn't bail out. So there was no option for me to run.
Yeah.
God knew that. That's why it was placed that way, in that order.
Right.
Because he needed me to be there.
Yeah.
I was in there.
Yeah.
I was in there. I fought that case for 10 and a half months, going to motions and hearings. And like I said, I had that little clause where potentially my case was going to get dropped. I had paid a very good lawyer and he was hanging on this. He's actually a federal judge now, the lawyer I had. He was a very good lawyer. And the judge at the time, he said he almost granted it. I almost won it. But he said because of the substantial amount of evidence that was found after the search, he didn't want to be the one to rule on it in this place and allow that case law to be there for future. But he said, if you take a plea deal, then I will allow you the right to appeal on this. So that's what blessed me from getting the 35 years down to a 10-year, which they allowed to run 5 years concurrent instead of consecutive. Yeah. So all that kind of worked out in the end, but it was exactly the time that God knew I needed. That's what I got. And I remember as I'm going to jail, my lawyer, he says, 10 years, man, you're young. It's no big deal. You'll be out before you know. I said, that's easy for you to say. You're going home tonight.
Man, 10 years. Wow. And
you're at 19. I was 20 by now. I was 20 by now because the 10 months I had been in the county jail. I was now 20.
Yeah. So you're looking at your all of your 20s are going to be spent behind bars in a state prison?
State prison, yeah.
State prison. Mm-hmm. And was it in Florida?
Yeah, in Florida.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So off you go to jail. And is this like, are you working hard? Is it like you're doing hard things in jail? What's jail? What's the whole state? And do you have I don't know what the term is, right? Do you have a roommate? Right? Are you
what's it like? Yeah, I'll tell you what it's like.
Yeah.
So like I said, so the 10 months I spent in the county jail, you're in it's an open pod. You have a roommate, they come in and out all the time because 10 months in the jail, a lot of times there's a lot of transitional aspect. That's when I started to read the Bible and open the word. That's where I started to read these stories. And what interested me in that is I would relate, or I would find things in the Bible that said, wow, I use that in my everyday life. That's where that comes from, like little sayings or different things. And I would find little stories that I had to say, let me seek this out. So I had that in my mind. Now I'm 10 and a half months. I'm now sentenced to prison, going to prison. When you pull up there in that van and you go through all the security stuff and the razor wire and, there's guys on the decks and you come out of that van, they strip you down. You're butt naked. You're in a run of guys. Everybody shaves their head. There's a they're yelling at you like it's, And then if you have a battery on a law enforcement officer, you have certain charges, you're going to get pulled out. Things are going to happen to you. It's just the nature of it. But you're told to just, before I went in, like I said, that one older guy said, who had been to prison before, he said, you got two choices. Look around. Allow this to make you bitter or better. And you'll see the people that made the difference. And he said, there's going to be a lot of people that come to you that want you to click up, join some type of gang or affiliation. He said, they're going to make you think you have to. Don't. You're strong enough to do it on your own. Right. So I had that wisdom spoke into me at that time as I went in there. So you're put in this, first it's a reception center. You're going through for 2 weeks. You're getting moved around left to right, medical and all types of stuff. Because there's do you need mental health stuff? Do you need prescriptions? Are you this? Are you that? It's a huge transition. And then after about 6 weeks, you're finally shipped to your main camp. I was shipped off to right outside of Pensacola in the Panhandle, just south of Alabama, to this place called Century. And 80%, 85% of the camp was lifers, or 25 to life. They weren't coming home for a long time. So it was a harder camp of one to go to. And you kind of just fall into whatever. You get assigned a job detail, but with that many people, it's usually inside grounds, where that means you are hand cutting or trimming the grass inside of the prison. If you've never been inside of a prison, the grounds inside are very well manicured because it's all done by hand, or self-propelled lawnmowers, or you get assigned to sweeping the sun off the sidewalk. That's always a fun one when you get called to do that.
Off the sidewalk. So you're literally just sweeping a sidewalk just to sweep it. There's nothing there.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. In the summer, in the midst of August or July or June in Florida dressed, hot. Hot, tucked in shirt, tucked in shoes and all this. But in those moments, I would remember about different stories in the Bible about how we're supposed to, be in that moment, and just like Joseph in his story, where he was just took pride in kind of what he was doing and did it not out of disdain or hate, but to just, that was where I would spend time talking to God, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So it was in those tougher situations that was really the Spirit conditioning me, without me really fully understanding what was going to come. Outside of that, it was just working out in the rec yard, playing some sports, hanging out, you meet associates, but I never, clicked up with any gang or affiliation, and there's things that happen, you getting put in some tough situations. Remember, I was working in the kitchen one time, and, I was a young white boy, about 130 pounds, 135 pounds, wasn't that big that time.
Yeah.
Had been in county jail for 10 and a half months. You're pale, you haven't been outside. Now you're going to prison. There's guys that have been there for a while, and they're going to try you on for size. Yeah. It's just how it is. Yeah. And we had all the dishes were coming out the back of the machine. I was working with this guy, and he says, he just stopped catching the trays, left it all for me. And I said, hey man, what are you doing? He said, I'm done, man. You can handle that. White boy, what he said. Yeah. And I said, okay, all right. And I just had to take control of the situation, because you can't let somebody overrun you. If you do that once, you're done. Yeah. You're done. That was my first instance like that, where I had to physically get into an altercation just to set a precedent, and you get put in lockdown, you get put in solitary confinement, 19 days by yourself, and then you come out and now you're at it again,
Wow, man. So you had to throw down with this guy, or just do something physically to.
I took a tray and I hit him in his mouth is what I did.
Yeah, right on.
He was sitting down in a chair, and so then I had the upper hand because I was over him. So I just grabbed the tray, acted like I was going to put it on the little shelf, and I just jammed it in his, real quick.
Yep. Yeah. And so solitary. So you go to solitary. Is that kind of what you picture in the movies type of thing? You're just in the dark in a cage, or?
Correct. You're in a single small cell. I forget the dimensions. There's a bed and a toilet in there, and you're by yourself. There's a little window that you can't really see out. And you're there, with your Bible and yourself. Yeah. 19 days for that one. Yeah.
No letting out for sunshine, 10 minutes, nothing.
No, you're in there. You're in there for that one. Yeah. When you're on lockdown for that, there's other ones where they'll let you out for an hour a day, but that one, I was in there.
When you come out, is it basically like, okay, this guy's legit, like we're not going to mess with them, or is it like, nope, now you're out and now we owe you one back and you're going to get back in a tussle?
No, that was they tested me on that. They
Yeah.
tested me on that. But then what happens is you see people that maybe are in other cliques, right? That are kind of bigger guys, and they respect what you did. And they'll just let you know, hey, we heard about what you did with so-and-so. We know you're trying to fly by yourself. Just let you know we got our back. And that came from all different angles, all different angles. Because I had another time where a Latin Kings, they told me I wasn't going to drink out of the water fountain in the dorm. There was a lot of Latin Kings growing in this dorm. The numbers were growing. And that's what happens, and then they have to, there's something that when a new Latin King comes in, they have to do something to prove themselves to their brothers.
Yeah.
And they sized me up and told me I wasn't going to drink out of the water fountain anymore. I told him I was going to drink out of it just as much as he does. I have every right. And then he clean clocked me. He stole me on that one. He knocked me down. He busted my nose up good. But we tussled, we handled it out, and didn't get, the guards saw, but they didn't do anything about it that time. We resolved it ourselves. It was like that. And he bruised me up good on that one. I was leaking bad. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night because the blood was just pouring from my mouth, my nose. And I was almost like drowning in it. I remember sitting up in the end of my bunk, and he was over there asleep. And those evil thoughts come to you, and you feel like maybe I should do something here, right? Is this where I'm supposed to do something a little more? Because you see that around. It goes around on there. And I remember the next morning, headed back from chow, and the lieutenant guard, he was like, hey man, we know what happened, but you're good. You're good on this. And that's how it. And then I was working out that afternoon with a buddy of mine who's a black guy who actually still friends today. He was the best man at my wedding.
Wow.
This guy Eric. And we were working out, and I told him about it. By this time I was getting closer to getting to work release. I had just able to apply. I had about 15 months left on my sentence, by this time. And he's like, I feel like I should. He said, if you do anything, you can. And I said, I know. And it was that opportunity where I got to turn the other cheek, from that. And I did.
The work release is toast, right?
Oh, you're done. You're going in there, and you're going to do 100% of your time instead of 85% of your time.
Yeah.
You're not going to get work release at all. So in that, I was able to turn the other cheek in it. A few months later, I got called to work release. And that's a blessing, because then you're out of real prison. You're still in prison, but you're not disconnected from the world. You get to wear normal clothes. You get to go out in the community and look for a job. You have certain rights that you get that we all take for granted every day, and that's one reason why I feel so strongly about our rights now and where we are as a nation, because I lost my rights. They were taken from me. I lost them. So the ones I have now, I feel so strongly about.
Yeah, right on. All right, so you're in work release. You're looking for a job. Can you find? As a guy that's in jail, are employers going, "Yeah, we'll take you"? Do they help you find a job? Is there actually any avenues, or are you just like trying to scrap it out?
So when you first get there, they send you to there's a community center that every town probably has, an organization like Big Bend, I think is what the name of it was, where you go there and they teach you how to do a resume. If people, because a lot of guys don't have skills at all,
right?
They've never had a job before. Thankfully, I was always gainfully employed. So I've worked in restaurants. So I worked for the state of Florida during the time I was hustling and selling drugs. I was administrative aid for them. So I had some work skills. So I went there, made my resume. I thought for sure I'm going to get a job in a restaurant, a lower level. I'm washing dishes. I've been sweeping stuff off the sidewalk for 4 years. I'm willing to do anything, Right. So I thought for sure I was going to get a job working in a restaurant. And after being there, 2 weeks, I still hadn't found a job, and some of these other guys were getting these jobs. And I'm like, man, this is kind of defeating it a little bit, but I knew it was going to come. Matter of fact, I had somebody my dad had sent me some shoes to work in a restaurant because I just assumed that I was going to get that job,
Yeah. All right. So you're looking, and at the end of 30 days to find a job, right? When you're in this mode of this work release, like you got to find a job or you're going back in the general pop, right? Is that how that's going to go down?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. If you don't have a job in 30 days, they're taking you back to the main unit and the next man's up. That's how it goes.
Up. So then you've used that that opportunity and it's gone? Do you have an opportunity to come back to it? Or
No,
is it like
no.
one and done, just back to the general pop and that's it?
Yep.
Yep.
That's
So,
it.
so
That's
the
how it works.
pressure's on. You got to find yourself a job, and
Yep.
it's not happening. And so as you start to get toward those last few days, what happens then as you're getting to the end of that 30 days?
So I actually, when I was about 3 weeks in, no job, I started not feeling very good. And I noticed I was always been slender. And by this time I was in shape. I was working out all the time. And a buddy of mine working out, I had like a bulge on my stomach. And he's like, "What's going on, man?" I said, "I don't know." So I started having this just weird feelings going on. So I asked them, the guards at times, "Hey, I'm not feeling too good. What do I do for medical?" Because in the prison, you go to medical and you they see you. You say you got to go to the hospital. This was a couple of days before Thanksgiving, and 2009, a couple of days before Thanksgiving. So I went to the hospital, went to the emergency care there. Guy ran some scans, did some X-rays. He said, "You probably got acid reflux. It's no big deal. Go back." So he sent me my discharge papers. I go back and I wake up that night in a pool of sweat. Now, I had been having night sweats for about a year, but I always brushed it off because there's no air conditioning in prison, the sheets or whatever. I was like, it's no big deal. I'm just sweating. And I woke up in a pool of sweat and I had this sharp pain in my shoulder, neck area. And I'm reading my discharge papers and it says, if the pain goes to your neck, shoulder, back, come back immediately. That's what it said. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow. This could be serious. So I went up there and I told them, "Hey, I need to go to the hospital." I said, "Okay, and you have your transportation is the city bus or yourself, and if you have a bicycle, you can ride your bicycle." So the city buses weren't running because now it's day before Thanksgiving, things were limited. So I rode my bicycle, went to the hospital, urgent care, same one I went before, and the urgent care physician there, he was a different guy. He says, "Hey, did they do any blood work on you?" And I was like, "No, they didn't do any. He just took the x-rays." He said, "I'm going to run some blood work." He runs some blood work. He comes back in. He says, "Man, we think we see something here. I'm not trying to scare you or anything like that, but I think we're going to send you over to the hospital for a little bit more stuff." I'm like, "Well, I'm in jail, man. You got to call I'm in prison. You got to call these guys because if I'm not here and I could go back to prison, this could be a lot more." So he understood the circumstance now too. So do that. They tell me, "Okay, go ahead and go to the ER." I go there and I remember being in that hospital room. I was there for about 3 hours now. They're doing a bunch of tests and scans. I'm laying there and a girl comes in and she's like, "Hey, you have, I think we're pretty sure that you have leukemia.
Wow.
It's very accelerated. What that thing you have on the side, that's your spleen, about to rupture. Your levels are so elevated by this time." And I remember they asked me, "How did you get here?" I said, "Oh, I rode my bike." And they were just blowed because my blood was so thick, it could almost barely move through my veins. It was like syrup. And so, yeah, that's when that whole job search mindset ended. And it was just like, what is this? And you not, being in prison for the last 4.5 years and then having this sort of on you. I remember being like, "God, why?" I said it then. And that was the last time that I will ever say, "God, why?" again. Just laying in there, getting diagnosed with that. They started all the treatments. And that was a powerful experience that I had there. They start doing blood transfusions and they're changing the plasma and everything and all these medicines. And they have a guard outside my room now at the hospital. He's there making sure nothing happens. I don't leave. And it was there at that moment that I had my first real experience where God spoke to me. I know the Holy Spirit spoke peace into me and overwhelming conviction and knowing that God was with me.
What did you hear?
So I was laying in the hospital bed. I had just given me 2 of these blood plasma transfusions. I needed one more. My body starts shaking uncontrollably, like the whole body just convulsing. And the lady said, "We're going to pause for a minute." And I close my eyes. I'm breathing and I'm just remember focusing on my breath. And the Spirit said to me, "Trust in me. I have never let any harm come from you. You don't have cancer. Just follow the process. You don't have cancer. Just trust in me. And I woke up and feeling better. I like everything I was feeling before. I was feeling better, and there was flowers in the hospital room. And I remember the guard came in just shortly after that to check my ID band, make sure I'm still the same person that was there before I didn't evaporate through the walls. And I said, "Hey, where did the flowers come from?" He's like, "They got delivered by some church." I was like, "A church? I don't go to church. I'm in prison.
Yeah.
Nobody knows I'm here." I had managed to sneak a phone call to my dad, through the hospital and let him know, "Hey, Dad, I'm in the hospital with cancer." My dad's living in Texas. I had connected with him when I was in prison. We started writing and communicating. So I built a little bit of relationship with him around this time.
Yep.
And that was the only person that I knew I was there. And he didn't send the flowers.
Pardon the interruption, everyone. Do you ever feel like you're out of alignment with your true gifts, your passion, and your purpose for being on this earth? Do you feel like you're grinding it out each week with the appearance of success and still asking, is this it? If so, I get it. I've been right where you're at. And once I figured it out for myself, it's why I started coaching. Now I help my clients get back into alignment with their authentic self. I help them find meaning, purpose, joy, and energy in each day. Check out my website at ericsardina.com to learn more and to schedule a free 15-minute strategy session. And now, back to the show. Man, so, okay. So you're like, oh, and that's right after you've had this moment where you've heard the Holy Spirit speak to you. You wake up, there's flowers, you feel better.
Yes.
The doctors check you out, and then what happens from there?
Well, the doctors came in, they said, "Hey, your blood counts seem to be leveling out. We're going to start you on some because at this time my blood counts were so high they couldn't even do any treatment because it was so elevated that nothing would work." And he said, "Hey, we were going to start leveling things out." And I remember this was the next sign that I got. Administrative aide comes in from the hospital and she said, "Hey, we know you don't have any insurance. We know your situation. Your hospital bills are accumulating kind of rapidly. What we've done is we've reached out through some options we have, and there was a charitable organization. They want to remain undisclosed, but they're going to pick up your hospital bills, everything to this point, and throughout your stay at the hospital."
Whoa.
I ended up seeing that bill, and it was over $180,000 for just a few weeks in the hospital.
Wow.
All gone.
All paid, all
gone. The doctor that the hospital assigned me to, his name was Dr. Mabry. He comes in later that day and he says, "Hey, I want to introduce you to my new partner, Dr. Bendari. He's an Indian guy, just fresh out of college. He's actually going to be taking over my practice. So I want him to be the one to start working on you from the beginning. So he's familiar with your case." So he starts doing a bone marrow biopsy. And if you don't know what that is, they basically take this thing, it feels like a corkscrew. They turn you on your hip. They have to get bone marrow out of your hip. So they feel like they're corkscrewing into the side of your hip. You can feel it and hear it going in. And they pull out a piece of your bone marrow, out of your body. And this guy's wrenching on me. So we spent some time together and we're conversating, and he asked me my story. I told him how I was in prison and this, and he said, "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. You have a long road ahead of you with this. But there are some treatments, this is the type of leukemia that you have is CML. It's typically found in older men. We don't see it in youth or guys your age. It's just not very common. So the medicine that's out is something that you take. Once we get the counts regulated and we find the right medicine for you, then you'll take it for the rest of your life. If the medicine doesn't work, then you would need a bone marrow transplant. That's kind of what you're facing, just to be honest with you." And he says, "What's your plan after getting out of prison? I know you're in prison now." I said, "Well, if they don't send me back to jail, you bend me back. I only have a couple of weeks left to find a job. By this time, I'm down to a week. I've been past my 30 days because I'm in the hospital.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do when I get back to the work release center. I really don't." He said, "Well, if you end up staying here, I will treat you for free and help you get the medicine you need for the first year. I would do that for you."
Wow.
Yeah.
Man.
And yeah, so that was the second. So I first had the flowers and I had these two things happen. And then I get a phone call in the hospital. And it's a lady from the church. She said, "Hey, we heard your story." I said, what church and what story, can I ask you? She said, "Yeah, we go to the church. It's a Baptist church. The work release center picks up the guys there and takes them to the church. And there was a guy named Tom. He told us a story about the shoes. And I told you it was something I had done when I was there after being there for 2 weeks. I hadn't found the job. Remember I told you I had the shoes were given to me? There was a guy in the day room who I didn't know from Adam, and he's sitting there and he was heavily distressed. I could see it. I said, "Hey man, everything okay?" He said, "Nah, man, they're going to send me back." I said, "Well, you haven't been able to find a job?" He said, "No, I found a job, but they won't let me start unless I have shoes. And no, I don't have anybody to send me shoes." I said, "Where'd you get a job?" "Working in a restaurant." "So what size shoe you wear?" He said, 9.5. I said, "Bro, I got him in the room. You can wear them." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, man, just take them. I haven't found a job yet. We'll work it out. By the time I need a job, we'll work out our schedule, or you'll get a check and we'll figure it out." I said, "Take the shoes." So he was able to go to work, and start working. I didn't think I now I've diagnosed with cancer. I'm in the hospital. The farthest thing in my mind was the shoes,
Right.
So he found out that I had cancer because the work release center, it was a buzz around there. "Hey, what happened to this guy? He's in the hospital." And he had went to the church and he said, he told him the story that I'd given him the shoes and how after being in prison for 8 years, when people give you something in prison, they want something back, and for somebody to freely give something without expecting anything in return. And here I was diagnosed with cancer. He asked them to pray for me. And there's no doubt in my mind that it was the power in the prayer from that church body, that here I was, that they were praying for a stranger, someone they did not know, that was when the Holy Spirit spoke to me. He gave me that peace. He cured me. I had to follow the process, like he said, but all those signs and wonders, the $180,000 being wiped away, the medicine for the year taken care of, just gone. And that peace that I had, and he gave me a peace, diagnosed with the cancer, and it's tough. I mean, you have times where you're feeling horrible. I remember I got back to the work release center and they said, "We're going to give you 30 more days to find a job, 30 more days to find a job." So that next Sunday, I went to that church, frail. I was on key. Now they're on this medicine that's trying to combat the cancer. I'm down to like 125 pounds, just can't keep food down, all the things that come with having cancer and being on these oral chemotherapy treatments. The bag has a radiation thing on it. It's eating away at you. And I remember going to that church that next Sunday, and I stood up in front of that congregation and I said, at that time, I really wasn't a full believer in Jesus. I wasn't. I had read the Bible, but I hadn't fully asked him, accepted in my life yet. But I believed in the power of prayer, very much.
Yeah.
And I told him that, and I said, "I want to thank you guys for that." And I told him the blessings that came from it. When I went to leave the church that day, I had an older gentleman come up to me and he says, "What are you going to do? Are they going to let you work?" I said, "Yeah, they gave me 30 more days." He said, "What type of work have you done?" I told him what I'd done. He said, "Have you ever thought about selling cars?" I said, "Never in my life." He said, "Well, if you can stand in front of 200 people and thank them for praying for you, you can stand in front of one and sell them a car. I got a car lot. Come see me." So Monday, I fill out the stuff. Hey, this is where I'm going to go. You got to put it all in writing. They approve it. I go, I get on the bus, and I never forget this. I remember it was raining and I got off the bus. It's rainy, it's cold. And I remember throwing up everything that I had on my body because of chemotherapy medicine. I'd taken it. It was just on me. And I remember throwing up and pausing for a second. And then I went in there and, went to use the bathroom, washed my face a little bit, clean my mouth out. It didn't smell like bad. And he gave me the job, and he said, "Look, I'm going to hire you. I've been in your shoes before." This guy owned the car lot.
Yeah.
He said, I had been to prison, made some mistakes when I was younger, but I also know that you need some help and you need to get health insurance. And he knew there was some loopholes in the law when that was a time that Obamacare was just passed, where they don't have to ask for prior authorizations for people. So he said, "I'm hiring you for this. You're gonna have to prove yourself to me. I mean, there's a lot of cash. I'm working around a lot of cash. There's a lot of stuff, a car lot." And he was like, "Don't ever, so we had that conversation. He hired me. And it was through there that, that led me into the career that I had. That was God just continuing to bless me and put me on the path that I was supposed to be. And it was a lot of things happened after that, but that was the first real progression.
The first real break. So now, you're selling cars, and you're selling, are they anything high end? Is it, what are you selling? Cadillacs? You selling Maseratis? What is it?
It was the opposite, man. God doesn't do that. God wants to humble you, right? God wants to humble you. So it was a small little used car lot on the south side of Tallahassee. Matter of fact, it's gone now. He sold it. He was going to sell it to me actually a few years ago. I didn't do it. God led me not to do it. But it was a small used car lot. It was grandfathered in, and it was cars from around $500 to around $5,000, $7,000. Buy here, pay here lot on the south side of Tallahassee. And he did his own financing. He did, other resources. He had some cars there that would go up to 10 grand, but not that much, and I remember getting out there having to make sure the cars were cranked in the morning so they would run in the cold. And I didn't know how to sell cars, man. I had nothing about it, but he taught me a lot about body language and speaking to people. And I always had a natural ability of just being genuine, so that helps, when you're genuine, people can tell. So that was there and ended up transitioning. So I worked for him throughout the busy tax season. And I was making good amount of money. And at work release, they take 65% of your income. That's how it works. You get 35% for when you get it out or spend it while you're there. And they'll also garnish any court fees you have. Thankfully, I didn't have any of that stuff, but there are some people that do. So, but he was willing to put some money aside for me so I would have a little bit extra when I got out, So as that tax season comes to an end, he lets me go while I'm still in work release. And I was all upset about it at the time, and I didn't understand it because I was doing good. I was selling cars, everything as well. So I had to go back into the workforce. This is where I started working in a restaurant at this later part. And I realize now why he let me go, because he was worried about when I got out of prison that I would resort back to my old lifestyle. And he didn't want to put his business up for jeopardy like that, because he had helped multiple guys in the past before, I found out later on, and they all had gone astray. They went back to using or abusing or doing bad things, and he wanted to disconnect. He didn't want to have that happen again.
Right.
So he let me go. I get a job in the restaurant, and I got a job washing dishes, a macaroni grill, right? And good old macaroni grill.
Love me some macaroni grill, man. Man, back in the day, I could punish some macaroni grill back in the day.
I ended up starting from a dishwasher and moving all the way up to the head chef, so I could make you some macaroni grill dishes. I could do that.
I used to, that Quattro fromage, used to eat that. Love the big jugs of wine they put on the table, the bread, all that stuff, man. We dug the macaroni grill back in the day.
Yeah, mine was always like I know the recipe names from the back, the P-Mello, but like the chicken with the mushrooms and and rigatoni. Those are my favorite. I still make it now. My kids love it. My wife likes it.
Yeah, we love that whole concept. That was that whole like exposed kitchen, chefs banging all the saute pans all lined up, fire, it was a big theater with the cooking, and then just it was a cool restaurant. I mean, it kind of ran its course, I guess. I don't know if they're still around or not, but
there's one or two. They sold so many times, that was the problem. They had Brinker Group. It was just a bunch of, they just got sold end over end, and that's what happened to them. But it was a great concept, great work environment. We had a lot of fun. That's where I met my wife, who's the woman that I would marry, that is my wife today. And that's why God led me out of the car lot to do this, so I can meet my wife, and my whole plan was to move to Texas, to be with my father this whole time now. I'm like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Even through the cancer treatment, my dad was like, hey, I know that doctor's treating you for free there, but I think you should still, move here now that I left the car lot,
Yeah.
And
a couple things come up for me, the thought of, if you're in work release, so you're working, you're not sleeping at jail, right? You're sleeping, like you have an apartment or something. Are you sleeping in a work release house or something?
There's a work release center. So you're allowed out from, depends on when your job is. You can allowed to leave an hour before your job starts to get there.
Yeah.
And you have to come back within an hour of the time you got off.
Okay.
And that's it. And then you're in a environment. I'm in a room with two other guys. There's a regular one bed, and then there's a double bunk bed, and you're sharing a bathroom with six guys, so it's a little better accommodations. You're in your normal clothes. You can go to the Dollar General and buy your own foods. So you're eating normal, but you are still kept there, no cell phones, none of that.
Yep. And I would imagine that the temptation, so if the program takes 65%, you gets 35%, you're finding a job where you're trying to, make a living, and I guess do you not have rent or anything like that? You're somewhat still supported by the system?
Well, they just take the 65%. That's for all the expenses.
All the stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But the temptation to go back to the ways that led you to jail, right? To like, I'm going to amp my income a little bit by, selling some weed or doing something, right? The temptation has to be huge. I have to think that a lot of guys stumble. Like the car lot owner was saying, he had done this before. He'd learned, man, I got to be careful. Once I get out of jail, they're going to stumble, and then my company's maybe at some risk, or some other bad elements come around the business because of this guy or whatever. But I have to think there's got to be a high fallback rate.
There's a huge fallback rate. The recidivism rate in the state of Florida and probably nationwide is 85%.
Yeah.
So 85% of the people that are in prison are coming back, and they hark that on you when you're in prison. That's what's told to people the whole time you're there is 85% of you coming back. And you look around because they give you a number when you go to prison. Mine was N12883. It's a number you never forget. You have to say it every count time, but there's a 0 in front of that the first time you're there. And if you come back again, it becomes an A, then a B, a C. And there's J's. There's guys with J's in there. B's and C's are very popular. The recidivism rate is very high. Wow. But no, to answer your question, while I was in work release, there was never I was done with that life. I was completely done, especially with being hit with the cancer, for sure. And like I said, God spoke that into me, and I was had found my faith. I wasn't fully accepted Jesus, but I knew that I was walking the wrong life before, and this is the life I'm supposed to walk. I wanted nothing to do with that. My goal was to get in college. I actually had to go and speak to the warden and kind of take it up a little bit with Department of Corrections to enroll in college before I was able to get out. They wouldn't even wanted me to enroll. I was like, I am going to change my life. I'm going to do a complete 360 turn on this. Matter of fact, before I went to prison, my mother always called me Daniel. That's my middle name. And I went by Daniel all the street life, all through prison. And I changed halfway through to Gerard. And that's my first God-given name. That's my real name. Yeah. So I kind of turned the complete shift on what I wanted to do and what I wanted out of my life. I wanted nothing more to do with selling drugs. I knew where that led me, and all the money and all that stuff I had, it was gone, man. And when you average that out for the time you spent away, it's nothing, So not to mention what that lifestyle is. And so, no, I had no temptation there to do that at all. But there's the drinking, there's the hanging out, there's the things that you missed out on. I was in prison in my 21, 22, 23, 24. Now, getting out at 24 years old. And so there was some of that. You want to hang out, and then you're around people and they're drinking and doing things. So those things do come up. But honestly, it was the presence of now my wife, but that at the time she was just a waitress in Macaroni Grill. And I remember seeing her. And the first time I saw her, I said, that's the woman I'm supposed to marry. I knew it. Wow. I knew it to the core. And, going back a little bit, when I was in prison, I really believe in the God-given ability of spoken power word that he gives us, and speaking into existence and writing things down, setting goals. So I used to write in my journal every night. That was my release. I used to write every night about all different stuff and prayers and talk to God through my journal. And I wrote down at one point everything that I wanted to accomplish, and in that was the type of woman I would marry, and even to the sticker she would have on her car. It was the weirdest thing to write about. And man, I met my wife. I knew that's the one I'm supposed to marry. We ended up speaking a few times at work, correlating this and that. She finds out I'm in jail. She's in college, about to go to her master's. She's a completely different life than me, and she's Jewish. Her parents are from Israel. So, you can only date a Jewish guy. Right. I end up getting out of work release. I get an apartment with a buddy there that I had met, who's also a chef at Macaroni Grill, roommate with him. It's a nice place. I'm working, I'm able to do this, start working 2 jobs. working at marble slab ice cream at nighttime, macaroni grill during the day, going to college now. Going to college. So I'm riding my bike. I don't have a car. And I'm on cancer treatment. I'm still on the cancer treatment. And I remember, and she said till today, she'll say the reason why one of the things that attracted her to me is I said, yeah, I have cancer, but I just take a pill. I don't have cancer. I just take a pill. It's just something I'm going through. And she was like, wow, who could say something like that? Because I had that peace that God had spoke to me. That was just, I had to follow the process. But I was very driven, working 2 jobs, going to school, and life was good. So I had no reason to go back to that lifestyle. Yeah. None at all.
All right. So you're going to college, you're working a couple of jobs, you're trying to get you an apartment now, you're getting your feet under you. I want to bounce forward a little bit in the story. So you end up getting married to your girlfriend that was the waitress at the restaurant, now your wife. And then kind of where does life kind of lead you to then? So I know at some point you get back in the car business. Talk a little bit about kind of how things start to evolve forward as you progress.
Yeah. So I ended up, as I was going to school there, I ended up going back to that car dealership, and he hired me back. So he hired me back at the car dealership. This is where I really fine-tuned my skills. I was out now. Me and my wife he was glad that I found a good woman that I was together with. She was going to school. She got her master's. She taught as a teacher 1 year up there. I'm now managing his car dealership. I moved up to where I am managing. He's out buying cars. He's entrusting me with the whole thing.
Wow.
And I was making, $70,000 at that time. And I stopped going to school. Yep. I said, what am I going to school for when I'm fresh out of prison and God's blessed me with this? It was like 55, maybe. It was like 55 at that point is what I was making from him. And then my wife was miserable because all her family was in South Florida. Now, like I said before, she's Israeli. All her family's Jewish. She's Jewish. The only reason why she was able to date me is because my mother is technically Jewish.
Right.
And in the Jewish faith, if your mother's Jewish, then you're Jewish as well.
Okay.
Even though my faith was different,
Christian,
but I kind of kept that to myself. That wasn't something that we openly shared with them.
Yep.
So we ended up moving to South Florida. I came down here, walked into a new car dealership, and was actually worked for my father-in-law for a little while at his pawn shop. That didn't go too good. Can't work with family members for too long. Wasn't myself, And I walked into a new car dealership, completely different from what I ever done. I was used to selling $5,000 to $8,000 cars, but walked in that new car dealership, and the guy hired me. He called my old dealer, and the dealer said, if that guy's asking you for a job, you better give him a job. You'd be a fool not to hire him. So nice. Got a job there. And within 2 months, I was the number one salesperson. I worked, I'm selling new Buicks and GMCs. They ended up acquiring Cadillac stores. So I was selling those later on. And the store had been, this family-owned dealership, they've been there for 60 years. They had to start putting new goals because they didn't have a goal over 15 a month. And I was selling 18 to 20, 21, 22. So they had to set new levels, and I'm still going through cancer treatment. I am on cancer medicine now. I've bounced around, not to cut that off, but I've been throughout this whole process. I was on 3 different cancer medications. Some failed. I was going to have to do a bone marrow transplant, and we didn't do that because we knew that everything was going to be fine. We knew that we didn't need to go that route. We knew things were going to come together, and there were tough times in there, very tough times.
Financially or health-wise or
health-wise. Yeah. Every month, I would be sick for about 3-4 days where I wouldn't even be able to work, but I was doing so good with, even in that sense, that they didn't mind. The dealership understood because I told them I was upfront about that. Yeah. And I was still the top producer, even at being off those many times, being sick, every month I would come back, ready to go. I was just wearing myself so thin. And through everything, it was a few years ago. It was 5 years ago. So 5 years ago now. I remember I was on vacation, me and my wife. They told us, we were on vacation with our 2 daughters. They told us I would never have kids, by the way. They said, the cancer you have, you will always have cancer. You'll always be on this medication, and you will never have kids. That was what was spoken. We never allowed that seed to take root. Had 2 beautiful daughters. We're on vacation, and I started feeling really bad. Like, I remember it was just really bad. And looking back, I never noticed how I looked in the pictures because you age. You see you every day. You don't notice it. Yeah. But looking back, I was sick. I was very sick. my wife was like, I said, something's not right. She said, well, when you get back, you need to get a chest x-ray. It was hard for me to breathe. So I called my oncologist. I said, hey, I need to get a chest x-ray. They're like, why? I said, something's telling me I need a chest x-ray. So they called it in for me. I went, and I had my right lung cavity was 3/4 of the way filled with this fatty fluid. They drained it off. Turns out my thoracic duct, if you don't know what that is, it's when you eat food, your body processes fat and separates it. The fat runs through your thoracic duct to be used for energy. I had a hole in my thoracic duct. It was pouring any fat I ate into my lung cavity is what was happening. So they were going to put me in the hospital. I ended up going on this very strict diet. They said, we'll let you try it. Never had anybody succeed from it. When I put my mind to something, I do it. And I was able to not have to have the treatment. But I was there in the hospital, and they still don't know why this happened to me. Because typically when this happens, it was a traumatic accident. My oncologist, he said, I did some digging in the files, and there was 3 other cases where people that were taking the cancer drug you were on, Sprycel, they had this happen to them. We think it was the cancer medicine that was actually eating away at your insides that caused this tear. He said, we're going to have to stop the medicine, but most likely the cancer is going to come. And before he could say back, my wife was in the room. She said, no, he's not. No, it's not. He's cured. We know he's cured. And we leave the hospital. He said, we're going to monitor you, come back every 3 weeks, and we're going to do these blood work, make sure everything's good. We leave, and she tells me of a vision that she had a few months ago that I'm laying in the bed, and there's this green mist that's leaving my body. And she had this overwhelming feeling that I was cured. Everything that I had spoke of before was real. And I'm 5 years. It was in March 5 years ago that this happened, and I'm cancer-free, no leukemia, no medicine, nothing. Even I go every 3 months to the doctor just to, obviously we conversate. He likes sports. I give him a break. We talk about sports, but he does the blood work check. And he said, man, I've never seen anything like this before, but you're healthy. I said, I'm the healthiest person you're going to see all year.
Wow, man. So you're so completely cancer-free. So you go from taking these pills and this chemo and all this stuff to we're going to take you off the meds so that your lung can heal and all that. You do the diet, and your wife's like, no, he's cancer-free. We're not worried about the meds anymore. And that's it from that point on, no more cancer?
Yep, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah. That's the beauty of God. What he spoke into me all those years before came true. I had to follow the process. I had to trust the process. And that process wasn't just medically, I'm realizing now. It was everything that I was going to go through. Because throughout this, God has been conditioning my faith, and giving me all the blessings. And like I said before, I wrote in that book. Now, here I was, and I noticed this just 2 years ago, that God had given me everything that I had ever asked him for in my life. Every single thing on that list, he gave it to me. Love, a beautiful wife, house, beautiful children, successful career, money, everything. He had given me that. And the greatest was love, and I felt that from my wife and my daughters. But throughout this next few years after the cancer treatment and everything, I really started to tune in more to God, really more, and seek out, and accept him fully, as my savior, because I realized what had happened. I'd always read, but I never fully accepted. And I realized that it was the love, not just of my wife, but the love of him, the love of my savior, the love of Jesus, that he was able to give me that. And through that, show me everything through my wife and my children and everything else.
Incredible, man. Love it, brother. Let's talk about Stand Up Now. I know you got the sign behind you that hopefully we'll get this video up. My focus this year is to get video up on my channel, so people will be able to see my guests doing the interviews. But you do have the Stand Up Now, and let's talk a bit about Stand Up Now and kind of what that's about.
Yeah. So going back 2 years ago, when I realized that God had given me everything that I ever asked for, I pulled into my driveway. I'm very blessed, monetary, like I said, all the love, everything. And it hit me that I had never asked for God for anything more than where I was at now, and I was kind of in this place where the money was just rolling in. I was kind of on idle. I'm crushing all these goals at the dealership. I'm cancer free. My wife, like everything that kind of held me down before, like mentally, that you're still like, oh, but you have cancer, but this, all these little things, they're gone. And I said, I know that there's more. So I prayed to God, and I said, God, you've given me everything I've ever asked for from you. Thank you very much. I said, but right now I ask you to please make me the best husband, father, and leader I could possibly be. I said, you're the potter and I'm the clay. Continue to mold me to the true man I'm called to be. I have 2 young daughters, a wife. I need to get closer to her. I need to be a real man, really step into some things, because I'm working all the time at the dealership. Yeah, money, but we're not putting our family and God and everything truly first. I wasn't really stepping into what I know a man of God is. And it was 4 months later that my daughter wanted to go to Disney World for her 5th birthday. And we live in Florida. We go to Disney World all the time. Yeah. So my wife had planned it out. We're going to go. And right before we're set to go to Disney World, Disney says they're suing the state of Florida over the Don't Say Gay bill. Remember when all that came out, when they said they weren't going to call boys in the park or girls. They're going to put transgenders in every film. And it was really just coming to head. We're set to go to this vacation. Being a conservative man of God, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go. But I also know that I didn't want to hurt my daughter by not taking her for her birthday, because I know growing up the feelings that I felt being hurt, Yeah. And I know that as a child, that's all she's going to realize is my dad didn't give me the birthday wish for my 5th birthday. He did it for my sister. So I said, you know what, we're going to go. And I said, what am I going to do? I said, I'm going to make a statement. When people go to Disney, they said, oh, Disney vacation shirts, they make shirts. I said, I'm going to make a t-shirt. And I'm standing in the kitchen. It hit me. God made man and woman. Just stand on faith, put it out there. It's truth. Yeah. So I jumped online real quick. My wife said, you're crazy. She went to work, jumped online, rushordertees.com, designed the shirt right there in their website. And they messaged me back and said they wouldn't make the shirt, that it was inappropriate.
And the shirt said, God made man and woman.
God made man and woman. God made it, has a bathroom symbol, man and woman, just very plain and simple. And they said, I said, what's inappropriate about it? They said they don't want to ostracize a protected group, is what they said. And that's their view. And I said, you know what? That's your right to refuse service to anybody. I respect your right, but I also know you're not the only person that makes t-shirts, So I called somebody I knew locally, got the shirt made, wore it to Disney World. And in order to get the shirt made, I had to order 24 of them. That was the lowest order that I could do. That was around $500 to get these 24 shirts made, just to make my statement. Yeah. My wife at this time, she's like, don't get us thrown out of the park. Please don't ruin the vacation. If they ask you to, I said, oh, problem. She even made me wear an extra shirt there. Yeah. So we go there and the opposite thing happened. Hundreds of people stopped to take my picture, get out of line, not to mention the smirks and smiles from everybody as I'm walking through Disney World with this God made man and woman shirt. Because by this time, DeSantis is saying, we're going to remove the tax status. Like, this is really bubbling to a head. Yeah. But I realized that it was from every age, every demographic, old, young, black, white, Asian, working at Disney, visiting Disney. Everybody loved it. But it was still just a statement. And stand up now wasn't even a thought in my mind. But as we're leaving the park that night, I had a guy tap me on the shoulder. I turned around and he was up in his upper 60s, early 70s, wearing a Marine Corps hat. He said, I love your shirt. Thanks for being strong enough to wear it and saying what needs to be said. I saw his hat. I thanked him for his service. And then he went and got into his wheelchair. So he had got out of his wheelchair to come shake my hand for wearing a shirt. Awesome. And the spirit hit me. The same feeling I felt in that hospital bed when God spoke to me, I felt it as I was walking back to the car, that we're in the biggest spiritual battle that we're ever going to face. And if we don't stand up now for truth, everything that all these veterans and everybody, our founding fathers, everybody has done is going to be gone. And I said, what type of father am I, taking my kids to the most magical place on earth when they're living in it and it's being destroyed right in front of our eyes? So I decided I'm going to start a brand that's dedicated to putting God front and center, using our own platform, because all these other big conglomerate platforms want to remove it. I said, if we know the truth, then we're called to do that. So in doing that, I started a brand that puts God front and center, stands up for patriotic American values, Judeo-Christian values, and they're all designed to start a conversation. Because I also feel like that's a problem in the world today, is they don't want us to conversate. They want us to put us in these little boxes and say, oh, if you're this, then you're that. And their conflict just arises. Yeah. I knew from being in prison that I'm no different than the next guy, right? That's a very humbling experience. You could be in a room and you could be put into a cell that somebody you never thought you would be with. and you're going to find something to get along with that person
Right.
about. There's just something that's said about that. And so I said, I'm going to start a brand where we can conversate, because we need to have these conversations, but it's going to be a brand built on biblical principles. So before I sold my first shirt, I said, we're going to tithe 10%, got connected to a local veteran organization. We tied back to them. And that's what started Stand Up Now. And through the grace of God and signs that he showed me, and me not knowing anything about apparel, nothing. Yeah. Because when I came back, the guy that helped me make the one shirt, he said, sounds like you got a good hobby. I'm too busy to help you. I said, will you at least guide me in the basic steps of what I would do to make it? So he led me, he was a middleman. He didn't even make the shirt. He led me to the guy that printed the shirt and all this stuff. So I started that process, and then God continued to speak to me through different signs and different tests in this next 90 days that really catapulted the brand. And he continues to speak through signs today, show me where I'm supposed to go.
Right on, man. So awesome. So so you got Stand Up Now, you're making shirts. What other things are you doing through Stand Up Now? What's your plan, and where are you taking it?
Yeah. So Stand Up Now originally was just started with the shirts, just selling shirts, but then God showed me there's so much more to that, because God has blessed me with amazing healing powers. He's blessed me so much in my life. So through that, he's made me where I feel comfortable to share my testimony. Yeah. 2 years ago, I would have never shared this testimony. I would have never shared this story. Yeah. But as I draw closer to God and Jesus continues to work into my life, I realize all the wonderful powers in the stories when I read them about how Jesus, when he does these miracles and blessings, he tells you to go out and share it with others. Don't keep it inside. Think about in Mark, where he called the demons out of that one guy, and he says, go and tell your family. The guy didn't get up and go to his house and mom and dad. He went to the 10 towns. He went to the 10 towns. That's your family. Everybody is your family. Right. So we're called to share those blessings. So through Stand Up Now and selling the apparel, God has connected me to big events. That's where me and you met, Turning Point. I knew nothing about Turning Point at all before I started. I knew Charlie Kirk had a thing. That's it, but I didn't understand what scale it was. It was a very small event that I went to that led me to there. But I've connected with so many people that have amazing testimonies, and we don't share them enough. So through that, we've launched a podcast on YouTube, Rumble. It's streaming on other platforms, but it's Are You Listening podcast. And it's people sharing their testimony. We always also talk about news, politics, and culture, all the things that are going on around us. Yeah. But in that, we tie faith, because at the end of all this stuff, all these things are important for us to know, but faith is at the core and God is at the center of it all. And we need to remember that and bring him into the center of it, because when we do that, he gives us the peace to not worry about any of this stuff, but to give us the strength to stand up and advocate in it. Yeah. So that's how the brand has just continued to grow and blossom. And it's been an amazing journey, and I'm humbled that God has called me to this, to be a disciple of his, to share the message, stand up for truth, and to tell people that Jesus is the one true Savior, and that when we truly believe in him and believe in his miraculous working powers, amazing things happen, and we can't limit his abilities.
Right on, man. So powerful, dude. Man, I love you. I love it. I appreciate you so much for sharing that testimony and your story. It's so powerful. And I'm so excited for the things you're going to do with Stand Up Now. And as you just continue to lean into how you can help the world, help others, and impact lives through your platform and all the things you're doing. It's awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Thanks for allowing me to come on your platform and share it. And the questions you asked, they brought up some stuff. So I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely. Where can people find you, man, and connect with your products and with your work and keep up with you?
Yeah. So all of the clothing is on standupnowapparel.com. You can go there and check out our full merch store. We have everything there. We ship it out to you. I'm also on Instagram, all the socials. It's Stand Up Now 2022. Like I said, the podcast on YouTube and Rumble is Are You Listening? Stand Up Now. And look forward to continue to spread this message. And we all are called to do it. So if you're a believer, we know that we have to stand up in these times. There's no doubt about it. And just to leave one thought, when the Israelites were led out of Egypt and they get to finally Jericho to walk around those walls, right? They walked around 7 times very quietly. But before those walls fell down, they all made a very loud noise at the exact same time. And through God's power and that noise, the walls came down. And I think that's what we're all called to do right now, is obey God, be obedient, but to make that noise and stand up boldly.
Awesome. Amen. I love it. Thank you so much, Gerard. It's been a great talk, man. I appreciate you. We'll get these links in the show notes so people can connect with you there. And yeah, man, I'm excited for more to come.
Thanks, for sure. My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on. It really, really was a blessing.
Pleasure. To our audience, thank you for taking time to listen to the show. Always humbled that you do that. If you would share the program with a friend, write a review, give us a rating, all those things help us reach a broader audience. Until next time, friends, I'm Eric Sardina. You've been listening to the Return to Authenticity podcast, and bye for now.